future is now. Bringing the game, change and style. The future of monetization for brands when it come to gaming. Break it down.
Hello and welcome to Game Changing Style, the fashion and gaming podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Tracy Greenan.
And I'm Theodalia.
Today, we're speaking with Haseeb Musa. Haseeb is a business strategist with experience developing go-to-market strategies for emerging products. He's conducted market research at Samsung Global Strategy Group, Monitor Deloitte, and currently at Meta Reality Lab. Haseeb's favorite project to date revolves around defining a pricing framework for avatar branded wearables. Haseeb, welcome to the show and Happy New Year.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Haseeb, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get involved in Web3?
Prior to joining Reality Labs, was a huge aficionado of VR chat. And not for, I think, where a lot of people claim or perceive VR chat to be outside of the folks that are actually using VR chat. I view VR chat as sort of the future of where we allow ourselves to interact and communicate with each other without boundaries. And what I mean by that is I feel like when you are in your avatar self, you can truly be who you want to be. And that world was extremely evident the first time I jumped into VR chat. I was in this, I'm trying to think of what it was like cabin in the sky. And I was just sort of talking to myself, saying that the view looked like Hong Kong. And the person behind me said, "Whoa, you're in Hong Kong?" And I said, no, I'm not in Hong Kong. I'm in New York. And then the person behind me said, "Whoa, you're in New York?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm in Kansas and I've never been to New York or Hong Kong. Is this what it looks like?" And I was like, "Yeah, kind of this skyscape looks like Hong Kong, but New York looks a little bit different." And I was like, "Well, what does it look like where you live?" And it was just a really beautiful, honest conversation that I don't think I would have ever had with someone that wasn't my age cohort, which wasn't my demographic, which wasn't my background. And it just allowed for that kind of conversation to take place, an open and honest conversation. And I think that really clued me into the promise of what VR chat can be. And I don't think I've heard that narrative be spread as much as, oh, VR chat is for fairies, or VR chat is where like you can go to a dance club. Yeah, you can do all of those things. And it is a really great inclusive community. But I think it can be an inclusive community for a lot of people and not just folks that are niche. And so that sort of paved my way into my interest at Reality Labs. And so was hired here maybe 4 or 5 years ago and have been working on go-to-market strategy, like you mentioned. And what that means is for our Meta Reality Quest headset and for the AR or smart glasses, I help to try to figure out how do we take that product and make it successful in market. And it's a combination of teams from marketing, sales, analytics, PMM, and UXR that combine together to form our go-to-market plan for how are we successful in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And my team specifically handles sort of the success for mid-range to long-term. So how do we think about success in growing the market in 2 or 3 years to where's the market going to be in 7 or 8 or 10 years. And so that's where the Avatar Marketplace project came into being, where we were trying to figure out what will the marketplace look like for digitally, specifically branded goods for avatars. And this research was used to help inform what it could or should look like.
So I'm so glad to have you on the show because when we had met, what was it, a few weeks ago, we were talking about pricing wearables. And we're really interested in getting your take on, based on your experience with how you came about pricing wearables. I remember when I started out with my brand, when I first got into Web3 about 4 years ago, and I was talking with people I was collaborating with, and I wanted to know straight away, what are my margins? What am I looking at? How do you price this stuff?
Yep.
And I never really got a solid answer when it came to what's my return on investment in pricing. So I'd really love to hear, or we would love to hear what your thoughts are on how does that all fit in when you are developing these products?
And I think at the crux of it, there's a mindset shift that needs to happen about what we're using digital content for right now. I think in the future, the conversation about what are the margins for it and how do we make money off of sales for digital branded goods or digital goods is relevant. But at this point, I feel like the market is so nascent, the user base is so small that we're not going to have orgs, or at least a lot of organizations, make a large amount of dough from selling digital branded goods. Now, that is to say that there are other opportunities to advertise or monetize from co-partnerships or brand, like other branded related initiatives with digital branded goods. But that product itself, I don't think will give you the return that you might be looking for, at least for a large facet of firms. It might be for a small few, but not for a large facet of firms. And that's because of that, my personal perspective is digital branding or digital branded goods today should be used as a marketing lever to either one, understand how your market is engaging with products, or to even early release digital content because it's easier to produce that and test out the affinity for that product and then put it into physical production, or to understand your user base more. So who's engaging with what? If you have a store layout, who's really gravitating towards the green hoodie versus the beige hoodie? And having a sense of that user interaction gives you a sense of what is going to be more popular when it's either produced physically or when you really produce a bunch of these digitally. So my perspective is that at this point it's a marketing exercise, and therefore it's a cost and not a revenue or margin driver. How much would you pay for each of these products? And the reason I asked this question is because we had the honest conversation internally, and I've had the honest conversation about this as I started this research a few years ago. So I like to pose this question back to the folks that I'm speaking with, because I end up getting different answers, and it's a fun way to really have an understanding of how we should be thinking about pricing.
I mean, okay, a Balenciaga hoodie, I think it depends a lot on quality, but I'd probably pay somewhere between $50 and $100. And then a virtual one, probably not more than $3.
And just as an FYI, because I've done this research, I know how much the retail version of that hoodie costs. So I'll let you know after Tracy goes here.
I have to say, if it's cotton, between $500 to $1,000, and virtual between $2 and $4, depending on the platform and depending if it's a limited edition product or not.
I like Fia's call out on the quality of the material. I think that's super important to mention, and it'll come back up again. And Tracy, I like your call out about, I think earlier you mentioned either what platform it was on or if it was limited edition release. Those two are super important. And I think I haven't heard the limited edition release comment from others. So I'm glad that you're in the world. So I know you know how to frame it. So I'm glad you brought that up. But to answer your question, or to answer this question rather, we know the real world price of the sweater. It is actually $1,008. At least last time I checked, it was $1,008. Hefty price. And so therefore, I was curious on what is the virtual world price for this sweater? What should it be? And internally, we didn't have really a benchmark because this entire industry is completely new, right? So how do we go about developing something for a brand new industry when we don't have any benchmarks? We don't really know what customers are willing to pay. And so what we did was take a look at willingness to pay from a number of products across the universe of digitally branded products. So I went to the Zepeto marketplace, I went to the Fortnite marketplace, and I went to the Roblox marketplace and found every digitally branded good that I could find. And what I mean by digitally branded is something that has a Zara sticker on it, an NFL sticker on it, a Disney sticker on it, a Balenciaga sticker on it, a Tommy Hilfiger sticker on it, a Burberry sticker on it. And for each of those items, categorized whether or not they fit into is it a jacket, a shirt, a pant, were they wings, or were they backpacks, or were they sunglasses, and then further categorize them into different brand categories. So if it's Zara Forever 21, it fits into mass lifestyle. If it's let's say Burberry, it fits into premium luxury. And went about the exercise. It took a few days to get through all of the content that was on these platforms. I got through as much as I could. And at some point, it just started to have diminishing returns because everything started to be priced the same or look the same. As a result of this exercise, we were able to extract a few learnings. Before I get to the learnings, I want to point out, Tracy, when you mentioned premium, or is this a premium or exclusive item? I had also tagged in here whether I found a premium or exclusive item and to what extent the price premium was for that particular item. And that helps us get a better understanding of when things are exclusive, either in quantity or quantity produced in other ways, what is the average markup you should expect from a digitally branded good for something that's exclusive? And so these are the kinds of sort of insights we were trying to get, but you can't really get them by just looking at one platform because the portfolio of content on a platform currently is so small because there's not that much. Zepeto I found to be the most robust. I guess this is sort of the content here. Zepeto I found to be the most robust and the most retail savvy, let's call it. Their product and price assortment worked off of a product hierarchy that is a, let's call it normal merchandising retail product hierarchy, which is like usually the things that are fancier cost more. And that's like the fancier quality or the fancier brand. So a Ralph Lauren thing will cost more than a Disney thing. That wasn't the case for Roblox. And the reason that that wasn't the case for Roblox was that there's so much user-generated content on there. And the user-generated content is also branded, as in like they can just pop in a Tommy Hilfiger logo on it, and now it looks and feels like a Tommy Hilfiger sweater when it's actually not. And that's a little bit of the teasing out that I had to do to say, all right, what counts as digitally branded? Are we actually digitally branded if it's user-generated and not really partnership effort with the brand itself? And as I was going through that, this is something that we're going to have to contend with in the future, where what role do brands have to play in a marketplace where users can generate their own niche brands or, subvert brands to make it cool, but still branded? And what are the privacy roadblocks or the boundaries that organizations will allow to say, yes, user XYZ from Roblox, you can pop on a weird looking Nike sign and that's okay. But if you pop on like a actual Nike sign, that's not okay. And so that's something that we're going to have to contend with in the future. I don't think we're there yet. VR chat has facets of that problem. Roblox has facets of that problem, but it's just something to keep in mind. So once we looked at Roblox, Zepeto, Fortnite, all of these products, we came away with 4 systematic factors that help drive pricing. The first one is product category. And this is super obvious because I think this is how things work in the real world. The larger item, for the most part, is more costly than the smaller item. The hypothesis behind this is that in a digital world, you are trying to attract as much attention to yourself. So the bigger the item that is there on your body, on your avatar self, the more people are willing to pay for it. So bags and backpacks, example, this Ralph Lauren Snow Beach backpack was much more higher costing than tops, bottoms, headwear, eyewear. On the converse side, eyewear is smaller on your head and therefore is not able to have as much of an attractive factor as a top or a bottom because just massively they take up more space. And therefore it ends up being on the lower end of the pricing spectrum. And so that's one lever for pricing. The other lever for pricing was how differentiated that particular product can be. So we see on the scale of price to differentiation, this Gucci Glam Rock Shoulder, it's called a pad, but is it an armor? I don't know. I'm not sure what it is, but it's a great looking piece of couture here. And because it's so differentiated, because it's unique, it demands a higher price. And the same goes for the item below it. It's unique, demands a higher price, but not as unique as the Gucci Glam Rock Shoulder Pad. Tracy, to your point about limited edition releases, this looks like a limited edition release. So you can see that the price of it is $750 as opposed to the price of the Gucci Jumbo GG zip jacket is only $210. And then subsequently below those two items, you get more normalcy and therefore less differentiation and therefore less of a price premium on those particular items. So product differentiation has a lot play on pricing, as it does in the real world to some extent. Brand category then is another lever for pricing for us. We saw the Balenciagas and Gucci's of the world categorized into the premium luxury category. On average, demanded about $10. Streetwear niche was a little bit less at about $5, and that streetwear niche category encompasses brands like Supreme and Off-White. The next one is mass lifestyle. Those go for about $1.10, and that encompasses brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Zara, Calvin Klein. And then the other two are about sub-dollar premium, sub-dollar cap, and that's music or celebrity influencer and sports entertainment. And the rationale for those two being so low in cost comes from the fact that when you wear those things, it's really to promote something else. It's to promote a baseball game. It's to promote a concert. It's to promote something that's actually going on either in the digital world or physical world. And therefore,
Merch.
you want to, yes, exactly. Yeah, merch. So you want to price it as low as possible so that people can wear it. And then other people see it as a, oh, wow, this person's wearing a Little Nas X concert t-shirt that is going to happen in 2 weeks. I either want one and I'm okay to have one at 70 cents, or I now am aware of this and I will go to it. And so the name of the game at the lower end of the category is how can I create as much appeal by having as much digital product out in the market for my physical or digital event, whether it's a baseball game or a football game or Little Nas X concert. And then the last thing, Tracy's favorite, the promotional pricing or exclusive pricing. We saw that when you have a collaboration like a Vans X North Face goggles, the price premium went from 1.2x to 4x the price. And when you have a particular item that's on promotional pricing, like they either have too much of these or they want to get rid of them, could be for a concert that they're throwing or a new item release, it's discounted from 25% all the way to even being free, just to get your name out there, just to get people to have it on so that we can create brand appeal for it.
I just wanted to jump in and ask you,
Yeah.
how often do price discounts happen with branded merchandise?
I think it's too early to make a broad assumption yet right now because the market is still so young that it's just on a case by case basis. When you say how often, it's like did the brand work with the marketplace? Like let's say if it's on Fortnite or Zepeto, did the brand work with Zepeto to say, hey, we're having this like physical release in May. Can you discount similar products in January through March so that it's ready for the May release? And so that kind of collaboration may or may not happen. I won't answer if it does happen at Meta or not, but like curious if it happens at Zepeto. I'm curious if it happens at Roblox. And it's that kind of collaboration that ultimately should drive promotional pricing, because that's essentially what happens in the real world marketplace. A Macy's will work with their brand to say, what do we want to discount so that we can promote you as a brand? And then conversely, what do me as Macy's want to discount because I want to promote it myself? And I think because the marketplace is so young and new, one, I don't think that there are enough merchandisers in that world to even come up with that kind of strategy. And two, if there were, there's not enough people buying these goods as of yet to warrant that strategy. So that question is hard to answer. I think in an ideal state, it would be merchandisers in-house working with external brands to come up with what is the seasonal strategy for discounts and what products are we discounting to support that company's end vision.
Great.
And so as sort of a coverall, the four factors that we were using for pricing or we need to be thinking about for pricing are these four. What product category is it in? Is the product differentiated in any way or form? What brand category is it in? Is it streetwear niche? Is it premium luxury, et cetera? And then what's your objective? Are you trying to sell a bunch of these? And if so, should it be at a discount? Or are you trying to create like a brand halo for yourself where the North Face it's a pretty decent brand, but if you're combining North Face and Vans and making this an exclusive item, does that elevate the brand? Does 1 + 1 = 3 at this point? And now you've created a sort of a strategy to elevate both brands by doing this. And if that's your objective, should you be pricing at a premium? So there's no good rationale yet or I don't know if there actually will ever be for pricing. I think what we need to be thinking about is what's our objective when we price things and how do we display that objective by partnerships, by collaboration, by discounts or premium pricing as we try to appeal to the right users on the market. Now knowing what we know, I'm curious, how much would you pay, or would you pay more for a hoodie that looks like this, or would you pay more for the soccer jersey that looks like this? Opening it up to Tracy and Fia.
Oh, I would pay more probably for the hoodie, I think.
Okay, why
personally.
is that? Why is that?
Because, well, that goes back to old school fashion design 101. I
Yep.
think there's more work involved in the hoodie. You've got the
Yeah.
hood, and then you've got the strings, the long sleeves, and maybe there's an option where you can layer it up with your other wearables.
Yeah,
That would be
I like that.
kind of cool. You could put a jacket on it, on top of it, maybe that doesn't
Yeah.
have a hood, or throw a vest over top of that, or a t-shirt and layer it up.
I like it. Fia, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree. I think the hoodie I would pay more for. Also, I mean, just thinking of like the what you were talking about when people are able to make like the UGC, really creative content and stuff. You see a lot more t-shirts than the hoodies. So.
I'm in agreement with you guys, but it turns out in the real world, this soccer jersey to the right is more expensive than the hoodie. So a branded soccer jersey with one of the partners that create the soccer jersey, like a branded soccer jersey, runs for about $100. A branded soccer hoodie runs for about $75. And so given that's the case, does this make us change what we then presume is on the virtual world is more expensive, which is the soccer hoodie versus the soccer jersey? I'm curious what your guys' take is now that you know, and you may have known before that the jersey is more expensive than the hoodie in real life. Does that change your perspective on how much we should be pricing this in the digital world or the virtual world rather?
Well, I got to say, when we were doing our research for Aura, that's my digital fashion gaming brand, we would go into, say, for example, Roblox. And if we were looking at t-shirts, we go into the best sellers and look to see what's in there. And then we can refine that by what we had in mind. And then we'll look at favorites and we'll take a look and see all time, recently, what are people buying, and then look at the price points. And sometimes you might not want to charge anything. It depends on what you're promoting. So if you get a freebie in a game where you have a free UGC, then don't price. And it has your logo on it. It's great for advertising. Players wear it, and it's like a walking advertisement in game wherever they go. So something like that, I think, is very valuable.
Fia, do you have a perspective on what you would keep it as is?
I think soccer jerseys or jerseys in general, like going back to the quality thing I brought up earlier, they have a different texture. Whereas in virtual worlds, you have like the meshes, which is like a different thing. So like the bigger the mesh, the more work is put into it. Yeah. So.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the rationale that retailers need to understand to get on board with this pricing mechanism. Nice. Sophia, you made a great point that the meshes are different. The sweater essentially would require more work, yet maybe in the real world, the R&D that would go into creating a soccer jersey for professional use would be more costly. And I think that's the paradigm that retailers need to keep in mind as they shift their thinking from physical branded goods to digital virtual branded goods, is that the things that make a physical good more expensive is not the same thing that makes a digital good more expensive or valuable. In the digital world or the virtual world, we need to abide by a different set of paradigms that value products differently than the physical world. And the reason that I say that is because as we were having this conversation with our retailers, the pushback was, wait, what do you mean that the hoodie is going to be more expensive than the soccer jersey? Because on our website, it's the reverse. And trying to explain that your customers are not the same in the virtual world as the physical world. Your reasons for buying a hoodie in the virtual world and the physical world are not the same. Your reasons for buying a soccer jersey in the virtual world are not the same, unless for some reason that soccer jersey gives you extra speed or extra powers in a game. You can't really price it much more because it doesn't have that equity for the consumer. And I think that's where I want to sort of leave off the conversation, is to say we can price these things as we will, but we're not solely just pricing them ourselves, right? Because this is like a whole marketplace. It's the Robloxes of the world, the Zepetos of the world working with different brands, and those brands have different consumer sets. And I think it's beholden upon us to figure out how to teach the brands that their consumer set for a physical item might be different from a consumer set for a digital item. And a good example of this is on Fortnite, right? Like you have folks buying a Balenciaga sweater that are essentially kids, teens, and young adults that definitely are not within the price range or target market for Balenciaga. And so right there, you've got a huge difference in the target market for that brand. But if you were to price something similar to what you were going to price in the physical world, you are going to lose the new target market that you just found, essentially the teens and young adults. And so there needs to be a learning exercise that the Fias and the Tracys of the world and myself need to go through with brands and with some of the other folks in the marketplace to educate them about the differences between pricing virtual products and how it should be different for pricing physical products.
You mentioned that brands have to start thinking about their new audiences and gaming. Do you feel that there's a difference in pricing items when you're still trying to maintain this sense of luxury within video games?
I think the fact that luxury items are available in video games is starting to hint at what a luxury item is. And having it be for a new cohort, teens and young adults, essentially, I think is very new for luxury brands. And I think this for them, having worked at a few luxury brands, this for them is a test. This for them is a lever to see, do we get activation from teens and young adults? And activation for them is, at this point, it's for them is, yes, they bought the hoodie in the virtual world. Did they buy anything in the real world that creates margin for me? If the answer to that is no in the next 5 years, they'll have to think about whether or not they want to stay and collaborate with Fortnite, or they want to stay and collaborate with Fortnite just for the marketing halo effect to say, oh, we're cool because we're on Fortnite. And the same goes for them on other platforms, right? So Zepeto, I think, is a really great example because it's not necessarily just teens and young adults. It's the most unique one that I've seen because it's actually femme forward. So 60+% of their audience is femme. And because of that, I think brands have found more, let's call it, I don't want to say success, but more affinity with their user base than the user bases on the American platforms because our skew more. And so to answer your question, I think that there is going to be sort of what I was saying earlier, maybe in the next 5 years, a shift away from, for the brands that don't find any rationale for them from a profit margin perspective, away from virtual. And for those that end up seeing as though their target market, teens and young adults, really resonate with their brand, and then it allows them to create profit margin at entry into the space. And it's nice because I think that these luxury brands are going to create the foundation for it because we know or hear of them much more easily, right? When we think about, oh, Balenciaga's in the space, wow, super cool, really interesting, as opposed to Joe Blow, like super niche brand that nobody knows about. But this creates the foundation for the niche brand to exist or to have relevance on the marketplace itself. And I'm thinking about like DressX in particular, where would it have existed a few years ago? No, but do some of the other brands existing on virtual platforms create a bit of lift for DressX and other niche virtual, say, retailers? I think so. And so I'm anticipating more of those pop up in the next few years, and it's going to be supported by the fact that we have traditionally retail brands on that space today.
Haseeb, you've already touched on factors of determining between digital fashion collaborators and brands and game developers when you were mentioning meshes and the detail in the work involved. Can you tell us what other factors that brands should know about when you're getting into this space for pricing?
I think the pricing piece, it really depends on if we're talking about just the brand itself. Let's just use Ralph Lauren as an example. Like, are we talking about pricing for just the brand to create the content? Because that is, to me, not where a lot of the pricing will come into play. And I think this is where brands assume that this is it's just like we'll just have someone design a cute thing and we'll put it on there. It's like, no, that's not the point of this. This is supposed to be its own entire market. And so if you want this to be its own entire market, you're going to have to replicate the same folks that are involved in retail design, retail distribution, retail merchandising in the virtual world as there is in the physical world. So a lot of the cost for brands, I think, will come from, do we hire the right set of merchandisers? Do we hire the right set of designers? Do we take the folks that are designing our Ralph Lauren purple label tuxedo and pivot them over into VR to help them design stuff for Roblox and Fortnite and Zepeto? And if the answer is no, then you're going to get kind of a really crappy marketplace because you're going to tell somebody else to do it. And that somebody else isn't going to have the understanding of the Ralph Lauren portfolio of purple label items to create this in a way that makes sense with their brand. And then they're going to say, well, we see, it didn't work. We tried it. And it's like, no, you didn't really try it, because really trying it means you're actually putting your assets in a place to make this successful. And my biggest hesitation is that retailers will claim it didn't work when they actually didn't try to do it. And so to answer your question, what are the other costs? I think the other costs they actually already know about. It's merchandising, it's marketing to get this content out there. It's sales and sort of partnerships with other physical outlets where they sell their products, and making sure that those physical outlets are aware of the virtual content and can promote it as a digital twin. So it's like if you buy this Ralph Lauren Purple Label tuxedo, you also get the Ralph Lauren Purple Label tuxedo for your virtual world where you can wear it to virtual meetings. And that kind of partnership collaboration requires people. And I don't think that they've hired those people to this date. And I think the reason is because they're still trying to test and learn from smaller initiatives to put one particular product out there and see if anybody bites. And I think it's too early, one, for the bite. And I think it's too nascent for those retailers because they haven't invested the right kind of folks, to your point, which essentially would drive up costs, but I think it would come with a better return too.
Yeah, interesting to think like, yeah, like the virtual twin type of ideas make a better sell.
And to give you like a little bit of insight into who I worked with here, I worked with a merchandiser that used to do merchandising for physical goods. And her and I were collaborating on what are the products that are going to be coming out, like what do they look like? And that way, when I get the list of things that are coming out, I am thinking about, all right, do we have something similar that looks like this in the marketplace? And using what you saw earlier, doing a few trend analyses to see what is the price differential across different platforms and different goods that may be similar to that good.
Oh,
So it's definitely collaboration with the merchandiser and then eventually sales. So making sure that that collaboration exists and there are actually people for the digital virtual folks to collaborate with is going to be super important.
Oh, interesting. So like kind of going off of the idea of the difference in merchandising, and we briefly covered about limited edition items and what those are.
Yeah.
Do you guys see a difference like in what is better to sell a limited amount or small quantities or for a limited time?
I don't know if that is nuanced enough yet because I think the market is still very small. I think for this, I would just lean on the general rationale for regular merchandise. And there is a slight twist in that it's easier to resell virtual goods. You can re-put it back in the marketplace depending on what platform you're on and whatnot. And so I would say if you're trying to focus on time constraint, like a flash sale, which is, you have whatever products, but they're only on sale for a limited amount of time, that will help flood. It induces engagement more. So a flash sale will induce more engagement. We use those at the other retailers that I've been working at. And if you get more engagement, more eyes on the product, and the countdown ticker induces you to purchase, you get more products in the market that are your product. And so if you want to, quote unquote, sort of try to flood the market with a product as quickly as possible, a flash sale is the best thing to do. So time constraint. On the other end, if you want to create more exclusivity, demand constraint is better. So let's just make 10 of these and price them super high or price them low. But what happens when you price them low is that you create sort of fervor for this product. And so a lot of people will want it. They'll sign up to like log on at whatever time to jump and get it. And the few that get it can also resell it depending on platform. And that increases the particular product or value of that product. So to me, the objectives are slightly different. One is, how can I promote myself by getting a bunch of these things out in the market so that my name is out there as much as possible? And the other is creating a halo effect on my brand to make sure that people perceive it as exclusive. And so depending on which lever you want to pull, and it could be different ones at different times, one can be used for, I have something coming out in the virtual or in the physical world, and I want to make sure that people get eyeballs on it. So I want to do a flash sale versus I really want to make sure people recognize me as the premier XYZ. So there's only 10 of these coming out. And I've done a collaboration with, Vans X North Face to pop 10 of these out. And there's only going to be 10. So you can sell it for whatever you want later on.
Steve, I have a question about Gen Z. Many teens that we've talked to have complained about the prices of skins in games like Overwatch, Call of Duty, Fortnite, Roblox. Any games with cosmetics that you can buy is really out of their reach. What do you think can be done about this?
Thank you. That's a good question. And I have an unpopular opinion about this one. So entertain me. I don't think anything could be done about this. I think we can't do anything about organizations that are going to try to profit off of our needs to be different, our needs to feel exclusivity, our needs for us to show off our stuff in the virtual world or physical world. There's not anything that's going to be done about that, period. I think what can be done and should be done is us taking an introspective look about what we're buying and how what we're buying increases our joy, how what we're buying increases our ability to communicate with others or relate with other people. What actual value is it bringing, and making sure that we're principled about the values that what we're buying create. And if it's just purely aesthetic, know that, yeah, you can buy one Balenciaga sweater to be cool and have some aesthetic value, but in 2 or 3 months, there's going to be something else that comes out and you're going to want it. And they as in corporations or organizations are going to price it at what anybody would be willing to pay. So as soon as you say, let's just make sure, let's see if this exercise works out, right? Like you say, what can we do? Let's say I had the power to tell all retailers, drop your prices for anything cool. Everything's $1 so that everyone can afford it. Perfect. They do it tomorrow. What happens the day after tomorrow is that a new retailer pops up out of nowhere and says, if you're pricing things at $1, I can actually price it at $10 and just get every rich person to pay me $10. And now every person that quote unquote is not rich will want that $10 item because it's exclusive. And then we start our flywheel of, corporate consumerism again. And so the best thing to do from my perspective is to recalibrate our assumption of what is valuable to us, each one of us, and pick products that resemble that value structure. So that's the unpopular opinion. So curious if that, I know that's probably not what anybody wants to hear, because it's like, well, that doesn't help me because I still have to pay X amount for my skins. But I think the more popular opinion to drive costs down for this is partnerships and collaborations with other organizations to help subsidize that content. And so what I'm thinking is when you have a skin and it has a particular patch on it that says, try and think of like there's an Amazon patch on it and it promotes Amazon. Annoyed that it promotes Amazon, but because of that, it's going to be heavily discounted and you're going to get it for way cheaper than you would a typical skin that doesn't have the Amazon patch on it, because now you're not promoting Amazon. And if you're thinking that this is, sort of new or you don't want to support this, I think that's fair. But then you'd also have to ask, there's a trade-off with getting it at a discount and supporting something like this versus paying a premium, paying the normal price for it, which is what I think other retailers will charge. So as we think about decreasing the price of these things, partnerships and sponsorships are going to be key to making sure they can subsidize this through advertisement, which is essentially how the internet pays for itself, right? Like we have the internet free, quote unquote, because advertising is what allows it to run. And I think in the virtual world, that is not going to be any different, because that freemium model is what allows us to have closeness and collaboration. We just have to know not to get addicted to it.
I have another question just popped to my head.
Yeah.
When retailers have a regular item that has just basic, like say a basic jumpsuit, say, how much more do they up the price for another jumpsuit that has abilities? Say a jumpsuit that has some sort of abilities where they can glide or something. How much more should that go?
Yeah. I didn't get into abilities. We locked the scope at just branded items. Our next step was actually to get into emotives and abilities. So like when you have an emote, what do you charge? What is the pricing premium for that? But I think this is sort of, it's too early to answer that question. And I think it is just dependent on willingness to pay. I think folks will just end up having different folks. By folks, I mean either retailers or platforms will end up popping in prices and testing them to see what works at different price points for different demographics, based on what they see sell, essentially doing a price elasticity exercise to say, if I increase the price of this by $1, what percentage of folks will end up stopping buying this thing in the next week. And doing a few of those will allow them to see what's like the perfect price, where if I increase it by $1 more, people end up stop buying. So that means that the price right before it was the perfect price for them to to get the right revenue or the right margin. Beyond that, I think it's super hard to say because it depends on the game itself. If there are so many folks in the game and it has so much affinity that people are willing to pay whatever versus something like Zepeto where it's just communicative oriented and you're probably paying for not a feature but an emotive, which I think would drive probably a lot less demand in terms of price. So yeah, I mean more to come on that. Like I'm happy to do a little bit of a research study on it because I think since I've done the last study, things have probably changed a bit. When I did the last study, I don't think at that point Balenciaga was out on Fortnite, and there have been a few other additions. I think a bunch of releases of Jordans, and I'm kind of curious how that the new additions with what you're saying in terms of getting either emotes or some sort of ability change the pricing of these things. I don't have a good question for that. It's a question mark that I'd love to do a bit more research on.
I have just one more question, I think, and it's a bit off topic, so I'm not sure. Maybe you won't know, but in your research, did you see if there's any difference between how much people are willing to pay for skins or digital wearables in a game that's free to play versus a game that's subscription based? Did you have any?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I didn't take that lens, especially because we were looking at solely free to play. We weren't looking at, and I think this is a matter of like, one, there's just not as much publicly available data for paid gaming. And I'm trying to think through the way that I've conducted this study and a little bit about what I've fired over gaming. I think the rationale is that if it's free to play, this is where they're open to spending a bit more on the content itself, like the branded content or non-branded content, just content period, as opposed to if you've already paid for a game, the internal, this is not research that I conducted, but just knowing internally, the feeling was, I've already paid for this. You can't, I feel slighted that you're asking me to pay for something else in the game versus, oh, the game's free. So I guess they have to make money somehow. So I'm happy to pay for a weapon or for a suit of some sort. And so I think that dynamic changes. One, gaming studios should be charging and what consumers are willing to pay. I think though, in the future that might shift because we are so early that even though you've paid for something in a game or in a world, you've paid to access the world. Let's say it's a subscription-based model. As people get more used to interacting with each other and more interesting emotes come out or more interesting ways to express yourself come out, people will end up by default be willing to pay more for them. I just think it's too early right now for that to occur. As we start to have more people in games and we want to differentiate ourselves even more with the people that are there, with the more people that are there, we're then now willing to pay even more for that particular thing that differentiates us.
Thanks so much for joining us, Haseeb, and for everyone listening. Where can listeners find you to connect?
Oh, thanks. I think LinkedIn is probably the best source. I don't do so much Instagram stuff, but yeah, perhaps LinkedIn is probably the best place to use. And the reason that I say LinkedIn is because I think the Instagram cohort probably has a better idea of where virtual reality is headed, where some of the things that we're talking about are headed. But I think the LinkedIn community being older and not as exposed to this world need the education more. And so I try to use that medium as much as I can to promote things like this podcast that I will actually promote and a lot of other initiatives. I'm speaking at MIT next week, and I think speaking with exclusively investors, not next week, next month, exclusively investors there to let them know about how they can think about virtual worlds and think about investment vis-a-vis what we were talking about. Is there going to be profit anytime soon? No, but this is a great marketing tool and you need to be here early so that you can profit eventually. And so in my perspective, I think the people that need it most are the people that are on LinkedIn. And so I try to engage there as much as possible.
Great. Well, we'd like to close with a skins and fashion trivia question to ask our audience. Which luxury fashion brand collaborated with League of Legends to create one of the game's most expensive skins? Was it A, Gucci, B, Prada, C, Louis Vuitton, or D, Hermes?
Check our website for the answer and leave your guesses in the comments or wherever else.
Juicy.
And also make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our socials, Game Changing Style everywhere. Or visit our website, gamechangingstyle.com. Thanks so much, everyone. Catch you next time. Bye.
The future is now. Bringing the game, changing style. The future of monetization. For brands when it come to gaming. Break it down.